Your body is not just a body. It's a cathedral of ancient decisions, accidents, adaptations, and echoes from a time long before you were born, echoes that still resonate in the way you think, move, feel hunger, fall in love, or freeze in fear. Every breath you take is powered by engines built by people you've never met and could never name, yet who live inside you, coded into your cells. You are not a single human. You are a living archive of survival. When you glance in the mirror, you might see yourself, your features, your shape, your expressions, but what you're really looking at is a mosaic. A face assembled not just by your parents, but by migrations, by famines, by forgotten winters, and ancient warmth. Traces of Neanderthals still ride in your blood, not as some strange, separate beings, but as genetic passengers who never truly left. You carry their adaptations, their strengths, even their vulnerabilities. Somewhere deep within, your immune system still remembers the viruses they fought. Your skin, your skull, the density of your bones, all speak the dialect of prehistoric inheritance. And then there are the Denisovans, a mysterious branch of humanity whose story we barely understand. They left no monuments, no tools we've named, just fragments of themselves nestled in the people of Southeast Asia, Melanesia, and parts of the Himalayas. And yet, some of their DNA enables certain populations today to thrive in extreme altitudes where oxygen is thin and frost is cruel. What they learned by simply existing, by enduring, now lives in others who've never heard their name. You don't need to know them, your body already does. But this inheritance is not just biological, it is behavioral. Your instincts, your reactions, your quiet pulls towards safety or curiosity, they're not entirely yours. They're memories made flesh. Patterns of thought that helped someone, somewhere, stay alive just long enough to pass their code onward. You might find yourself avoiding certain foods, preferring certain landscapes, distrusting certain expressions on people's faces, and while society calls it personality or taste, deep down, much of it is survival written into your genome, scribbled hurriedly during a storm or famine 100 generations ago. It's strange, isn't it? To realize that much of what you consider you might be more accurately described as them, your ancestors, your predecessors, your accidental architects. The reason you're standing here, breathing and thinking, is because they made it, and not all of them were strong or smart. Some were just lucky, some were brutal, some were kind, many were afraid. But all of them managed to pass something on, something that endured the long night of time. You, and that's the paradox. You are unique, yes. No one has ever lived with exactly your mix of genes, thoughts, and experiences. But you are also deeply unoriginal in the most beautiful way. You are a remix of countless lives shaped by fire and ice, migration and isolation, harmony and violence. You are what happened when the genes of survivors collided, adapted, recombined, and carried on. When you feel anxiety before stepping into a crowd, when your heart races as you hear rustling in the dark, when your palms sweat before a crucial conversation. Those reactions are older than cities, older than writing, older than history itself. You are, in many ways, a modern vehicle for ancient software, a 21st century body running instincts that evolved for survival in the wilderness, where every rustle might be a predator and every stranger might be a threat. You don't live in that ice age, but your body still thinks you might. You don't need to hunt or gather or sleep in caves, but somewhere deep in your genetic blueprint, those instructions still exist. Not as commands, your life is yours to live, but as quiet whispers in the background, shaping the way you interpret your world. And even now, scientists continue to discover just how far this prehistoric influence stretches. It's in your response to medication. It's in how your body processes fat or sugar. It's in your sleep patterns, your risk for certain conditions, even the way your skin reacts to sunlight. These aren't random traits. They're evolutionary scars and gifts handed down from bodies that lived before roads, before clocks, before written memory. We often think of history as something that happened out there, something we read in books or see in ruins. But history is not only around you, it is within you, etched into the microscopic threads of your DNA, carried in every cell like a story written without words. You are not a blank page. You are the latest chapter of an ancient novel that never stopped being written. And the most astonishing part? This genetic legacy continues to evolve. What your body records today, your choices, your exposures, your traumas, may subtly echo forward into the generations that follow you. Just as you are the product of the prehistoric past, you are also the prehistory of someone else. The chain does not end with you, it flows through you. You are not a fossil. You are a witness, a continuation, a walking testimony that someone, many someones, lived, endured, adapted, and loved. You are what remains of their hopes and fears, their mistakes and triumphs. Not just a human being, but a living memory of life's most relentless force, the will to continue. And as we dive deeper into the ways this ancient code shapes your daily experience in your health, your emotions, your relationships, your habits, remember this. The most surprising thing about your prehistoric DNA isn't how old it is, it's how alive it still is. You live in a world of schedules, smartphones, passwords, and polite conversation. But your nervous system? It still thinks you're being hunted. It still scans every shadow for danger, listens for the snap of a twig, prepares your muscles for sprint or stillness. You might be standing in line for coffee, but your body is already rehearsing an escape plan, because deep within, it doesn't know the saber-toothed cat is extinct. Anxiety isn't just a modern inconvenience. It's one of your oldest survival tools. Long before therapy apps and breathing exercises, it was the reason your ancestors didn't get eaten. Those who noticed danger first, who startled more easily, who anticipated disaster, who felt dread before it arrived, they were the ones who lived. They didn't call it anxiety. They called it staying alive. Their nervous systems were tuned to be hyper-responsive, always 1 second ahead of catastrophe. And those responses didn't vanish. They were passed down, encoded, and reinforced with every narrow escape. Today, that same ancient alarm system is still in place. It doesn't recognize that your threats are now traffic jams, deadlines, or social media notifications. It only knows that something feels off. It pumps cortisol through your bloodstream, accelerates your heartbeat, sharpens your focus, and narrows your perception. You feel trapped, but it's not your surroundings. It's your DNA, echoing from a time when being jumpy saved lives. This isn't just metaphorical. Studies show that people who carry certain variants of prehistoric DNA are more sensitive to environmental stressors. Their amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear, activates faster and stays active longer. What was once a valuable trait for surviving predators now becomes a chronic background noise in a world where danger often comes in the form of unanswered emails. It's not just fear, irritability, sudden outbursts, even that feeling of being overwhelmed by too many people talking at once. These are not signs that you're weak. They're signs that your ancient instincts are firing off in a world that doesn't match the script they were written for. You're a hunter-gatherer running software built for survival, not for navigating corporate meetings or late-night group chats. And when your environment changes faster than your biology can keep up, tension becomes a permanent guest. Even insomnia, the exhausting loop of lying awake, heart racing, brain refusing to shut off, can be traced back to ancient safety strategies. In the wilderness, uninterrupted sleep could mean vulnerability. Those who stirred at the slightest sound, who slept lightly, who awoke to the creak of a branch or the hush of movement, they were more likely to survive. Your body still holds that watchfulness. It doesn't know your bedroom is safe. It only knows that sleep is risky and waking is wise. And yet, within all this hypervigilance lies a strange kind of brilliance. Your ancestors' ability to feel fear, not just to run from it, but to anticipate it, shaped the architecture of your brain. The very circuits that make you anxious are the ones that gave rise to empathy, planning, creativity, and storytelling. They're the same circuits that let you imagine the future, recognize patterns, prepare for the worst. Anxiety isn't just an overreaction, it's a deeply rooted mechanism for simulation and survival. But in the modern world, where threats rarely take physical form, this ancient alarm can become maladaptive. You check your phone not because it brings joy, but because your body interprets silence as danger. You overanalyze a coworker's tone because your brain is searching for hidden hostility. You cancel plans, avoid crowds, isolate, not out of choice, but because your prehistoric mind whispers that unfamiliar groups once meant death. None of this means you are broken. On the contrary, it means you are profoundly connected to a lineage that endured through vigilance. The very feelings that exhaust you now were once tools of resilience. And while they may no longer serve you the way they once did, they still deserve to be understood. Your tension, your restlessness, your unease, they are not mistakes. They are ancient stories written in chemical signals. The real challenge isn't to erase these signals, but to reinterpret them, to see your anxiety not as an enemy, but as a relic of a time when safety was never guaranteed, a time when fear was currency and calm was earned only after the fire was lit and the cave door was blocked with stone. In many ways, you are still blocking that door, only now it's with coping mechanisms, habits, and rituals that attempt to trick your ancient biology into feeling secure. And maybe, just maybe, that's the beginning of peace, not fighting the fear, but acknowledging its origin, realizing that what you feel isn't weakness, it's memory, memory so old it has no words, no image, no voice, just sensation. You're not too sensitive, you are finely tuned, not fragile, but ancient. And what happens when you stop trying to silence that ancient voice and start listening instead? That's when the story of your survival begins to change. You stand in front of the fridge, not hungry, but restless. Your hand reaches for something salty, something sweet, something greasy. And even though you promised yourself that this time you'd make a better choice, you give in again. The modern world calls it lack of discipline. Diet culture calls it failure. But your DNA, it calls it survival. Because the craving you're trying to fight isn't yours alone. It belongs to every ancestor who ever went to bed with an empty stomach, unsure if the next meal would ever come. Hunger wasn't always a 3 times a day inconvenience. For most of human history, it was a constant companion, an invisible predator that stalked our species as persistently as wolves or frost. Food was never guaranteed. It had to be chased, foraged, fought for, and when it came, it had to be consumed, all of it, as much as possible, while it lasted. Those who could eat beyond fullness, who could store energy in fat, who craved the richest sources of calories, they had the edge. They didn't starve during lean seasons. They survived, and they passed on their genes. You are the child of those survivors. Your appetite isn't weak, it's ancient. Your love of sugar? That's not indulgence. It's a 300,000-year-old reward system honed to recognize ripe fruit, quick energy, and rare luxury. Back then, sweetness meant safety. It meant nutrients. It meant life. There were no cupcakes in the forest. So when your brain tastes sugar, it still lights up as if you found a tree full of ripe figs after weeks of scarcity. Only now the figs are replaced by soda, candy, and pastries you can buy on every corner, with no effort, no risk, and no end. Fat, too, was a prize. High-fat foods gave more than double the energy of proteins or carbohydrates, and they were rare in nature. A cache of fatty meat from a successful hunt was like gold. If your ancestors could eat beyond what they needed, store it in their bodies, and hold on to it during hard times, they survived. Today, that same mechanism still runs, even though the famine never comes. The pantry is always full, but your biology never got the update. It still eats like winter is coming. Even your eating speed may not be a modern habit. Those who ate faster got more of the meal before others could take it. Those who hoarded, who snuck extra portions, who felt anxious when food was scarce, they made it. They left their imprint on you. That urge to finish the whole bag of chips, to keep snacking even after a meal, to feel discomfort at the idea of wasting food. It's not just psychology, it's deep programming. And what about cravings? Why do we desire what we know we shouldn't? Because your brain still responds to calorie density like it's a miracle. Foods that combine fat, salt, and sugar, like burgers, pizza, chocolate, send your reward circuits into overdrive. Not because they're evil, but because they mimic the rarest and most valuable combinations from your evolutionary past. You're not addicted to junk food because you're weak. You're drawn to it because it sings the song of survival your genes still remember. Modern dieting, with its restrictions and shame, often ignores this ancient wisdom. It frames hunger as an enemy, cravings as betrayal, fat as failure. But your body doesn't know what a calorie count is. It only knows that you're trying to deny the very impulses that once kept your lineage alive. When you skip meals, when you ignore hunger cues, when you try to outsmart your biology, your body assumes you're in danger and it fights back. It slows your metabolism. It heightens your cravings. It makes you dream of food. Not because it's punishing you, but because it thinks you're starving in a land where food has disappeared again. Even the emotional connection to food has prehistoric roots. A successful hunt or harvest meant celebration, bonding, safety. Sharing food was sharing life. That's why comfort food exists, not just to taste good, but to signal safety, to calm your nervous system. It's not just nostalgia, it's biochemical reassurance. You're not alone, you're fed, you're safe, and when you overeat, that too has a reason. Your ancestors didn't stop when full. They kept eating because they didn't know when the next meal would come. Fullness wasn't the goal, survival was. So your body still reacts with gratitude, not guilt, when you give it more than enough. It stores the excess just in case the world turns cold again. But here's the catch. The world has changed. Food is no longer rare, but your instincts haven't caught up. You're walking through a calorie-rich jungle that your genes mistake for paradise after famine. And while modern life offers abundance, your body is still built for survival, not moderation. Understanding this doesn't mean surrendering to every craving. It means rethinking the story. You are not broken. Your appetite isn't flawed. You're carrying the wisdom of thousands of generations, people who did what they had to do so you could be here now, reaching for another snack not out of failure, but out of finely tuned adaptation. And maybe, instead of fighting those instincts, it's time to work with them, to feed your body not with guilt, but with understanding, to eat in a way that honors both the past and the present, to recognize that your cravings don't make you weak, they make you human, ancient, beautiful, and still surviving. Your body was designed for a world that no longer exists. It evolved in the mud, the bloods, the cold, and the chaos, not in sterile apartments, filtered air, and hand sanitizer. The genes that once kept your ancestors alive in brutal environments are now the same ones confusing your immune system, leaving it fighting battles that don't exist, mistaking pollen for poison and healthy cells for enemies. Diseases like allergies, autoimmune disorders, and even some forms of diabetes aren't the result of modern weakness. They're the side effects of ancient strength deployed in the wrong era. Imagine a child living 10,000 years ago. He's barefoot, playing in dirt that's teeming with bacteria, fungi, worms, and insect larvae. His immune system doesn't have the luxury of peace. It has to be aggressive, constantly learning, constantly defending. Every microbe is a potential threat. The immune response becomes hypervigilant, not only destroying invaders, but memorizing patterns, overreacting just to be safe. This child survives. His immune system, despite its excessive alarmism, becomes his best weapon. He grows up, has children, passes down those same hyperreactive genes. Fast forward to now. You live in a world where you're told to disinfect, to wash away germs, to sterilize every surface. And yet, your immune system hasn't gotten the message. It's still looking for parasites, still primed to attack. Only now, without real threats to fight, it turns on the harmless. Dust mites, tree pollen, cat dander, peanuts. Your immune system, once the protector, becomes the attacker. It's not malfunctioning. It's misdirected. It's doing the job it was built to do, just in an environment it doesn't understand. This is what scientists call the hygiene hypothesis, the idea that the more sterile our surroundings become, the more confused our immune systems get. without the bacteria, viruses, and parasites they evolved to handle. They start inventing threats. It's not just poetic irony, it's evolutionary lag. Your immune system is still living in the forest while you're living in a condo. And this overreaction doesn't stop at the external. Autoimmune diseases, when the body attacks its own tissues, might also be the product of evolutionary overengineering. Some of the very same genetic traits that protected your ancestors from deadly infections now make you more vulnerable to conditions like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, or type 1 diabetes. Why? Because those genes didn't evolve to coexist with modern diets, sedentary lives, and a lack of environmental exposure. They evolved in hardship, and they expect to find hardship still. Take diabetes. In ancient times, the ability to quickly store sugar as fat was a survival superpower. It meant you could build energy reserves after a rare sweet find, a cluster of berries, a bit of honey, and draw from that reserve during lean times. But now, those same genes meet a world where sweetness is constant and movement is minimal. The system goes haywire. Sugar becomes an overload, fat storage turns chronic, and what once was a gift becomes a trap. Even cold resistance has its hidden costs. Populations adapted to harsh climates with genes that helped them conserve energy, store fat efficiently, or regulate body heat may now face higher risks for certain modern illnesses when that same biology operates in climate-controlled, sedentary settings. The adaptations weren't mistakes, they were marvels of engineering, but they were tuned for survival in snow, not sofas. And then there's inflammation, the ancient tool of repair and defense. In a world full of wounds, bites, burns, and bacterial assaults, inflammation was essential. It was the body's way of drawing the line, building a wall, sounding the alarm. But in the modern world, that same inflammation doesn't always know when to stop. It becomes chronic, smoldering under the surface, contributing to heart disease, arthritis, and countless other conditions. The immune system thinks the war never ended, so we're left with this contradiction. We are more protected than ever, and yet our bodies act like we're still under siege. The clean water, the antibiotics, the closed windows, these are modern miracles. But your genes still believe you live in a swamp. They're scanning for leeches and looking for worms. And when they can't find them, they invent enemies. It's not betrayal, it's miscommunication across thousands of years. That doesn't mean we're doomed. It means we're misunderstood, even by ourselves. We blame our bodies for failing us, when in truth, they're operating by a playbook written for a different battlefield. They're over-prepared soldiers in a war that no longer exists. The real question, then, is not how to silence these ancient mechanisms, but how to retrain them. Can we create environments and lifestyles that speak the language of our DNA while living in a future our ancestors couldn't imagine? Can we find a way to live in peace with immune systems that were forged in fire? Maybe it begins with compassion, understanding that your body isn't wrong. It's trying to protect you the only way it knows how. The discomfort you feel, the diseases you battle, the confusion of a system attacking itself, it all started as a blueprint for survival. And sometimes, the cost of being built to endure is carrying weapons even when the enemy is gone. You catch a cold, and it barely touches you, a sore throat, a day of fatigue, then you're fine. But your friend, flat in bed for a week, two bodies, two viruses, two completely different outcomes. And while modern science might point to stress levels, or sleep, or underlying conditions, part of the truth lies far deeper. It lives in the marrow of your bones, in the silent code passed down from bodies that fought, and sometimes lost, long before antibiotics or vaccines. Your immune system is not a blank slate. It's an heirloom, a living fossil. And every sneeze, every fever, every recovery tells a story much older than you. When we speak of survival in the prehistoric world, we often imagine predators and famines, the visible threats, but the deadliest enemies weren't seen. They crept in through cuts, contaminated food, or the air itself. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, silent, invisible hunters. They didn't roar, they spread, and they didn't just take one life, they could wipe out entire clans. Those who survived weren't always the strongest or the fastest. They were the ones with immune systems wired to react just right, aggressively when needed, and calmly when not. And over time, the survivor's biology became legacy. Certain gene variants, those that helped mount a stronger or quicker defense, were passed on. Sometimes, even just having a fever that lasted longer than others gave you an edge. Not all immune systems were created equal. They were forged in waves of infection, molded by plagues you've never heard of, shaped by exposure to pathogens that haven't existed in thousands of years. Take the case of Neanderthal DNA. When Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa and into Eurasia, they encountered new viruses, unfamiliar, deadly, and fast. But Neanderthals had already lived in those regions for hundreds of thousands of years. They had developed immune adaptations, battle-tested and blood-earned. And when modern humans interbred with them, they inherited more than just heavy brows or broad noses. They inherited genetic defense systems, some of which are still active today. In fact, some of the same Neanderthal gene variants linked to immune response are now known to influence how modern humans react to influenza, HIV, and even COVID. For some, that inheritance means more robust protection. For others, it can trigger excessive inflammation, where the body fights too hard, and the immune system becomes a double-edged sword. What once saved lives in a prehistoric forest may now push the body into dangerous overdrive in a hospital room. But not all immune stories are written in Europe or Asia. Populations around the world faced their own ancient epidemics, each leaving a unique imprint. In parts of Africa, gene variants developed to fight off malaria, reshaping blood cells in ways that still affect how oxygen travels through the body. In the Americas, isolated tribes had less exposure to pathogens like smallpox or measles, and when these arrived with colonizers, the devastation was swift. Immunity is history, and history is not equally distributed. Even your childhood immune response carries echoes of the ancient past. Some people develop immunity more slowly, but hold on to it longer. Others spike a fast, powerful reaction that neutralizes threats in hours. These patterns aren't just personal quirks, they're echoes of different evolutionary paths. Paths where reacting fast might save you from a wound infection, but reacting slowly might stop you from burning out your own tissues in the process. It's not just about surviving illness, it's about how the body remembers it. Your immune system doesn't just fight, it learns. And that memory is partly individual, but also ancestral. Some families, some lineages, carry immune templates, sets of instructions for dealing with certain viral shapes or bacterial invaders. If your ancestors were exposed to something similar, your body may already be better prepared, like someone who's practiced a drill before the real emergency hits. But this ancient inheritance isn't perfect. Sometimes the body mistakes friend for foe. It overreacts, misfires, or turns its old programming onto new enemies it doesn't understand. That's why one virus can trigger nothing in one person and chaos in another. It's not just the virus, it's the history that meets it. Even your gut, the epicenter of modern immunity, is shaped by this lineage. The diversity of bacteria inside you isn't random. It reflects the environments your ancestors lived in, the food they ate, the diseases they endured. Some gut ecosystems are naturally more robust, more balanced, not because of yogurt or supplements, but because of centuries of microbial inheritance. You don't just inherit your grandmother's eyes, you inherit the way her body responded to a stomach bug, a contaminated river, a winter with spoiled food. And as our world becomes more global, more urban, more medicated, those ancient immune maps are being redrawn, but slowly, too slowly. Your DNA still assumes you might have to drink from a muddy stream, dig for roots, or survive a festering wound. It prepares you for wars that mostly never come, and sometimes misses the ones that do. The beauty and burden of this immune inheritance is that it's imperfect. It remembers too much or not enough. It overreacts or underperforms. But every immune response you've ever had, every fever, every cold you shook off or didn't, is shaped by survival strategies crafted in caves and savannas, not clinics and cities. And if you've ever wondered why you get sick more than others, or less, the answer may be written not in your lifestyle, but in the struggles of people whose names you'll never know. People whose immune victories became the silent shields you carry now. Every cough, every recovery, a whispered reminder that you were built to endure, and that survival isn't just a personal triumph. It's a gift that began long before you. You think you're choosing your partner based on shared values, common interests, a sense of humor, or the way they look at you across the room. But beneath the poetry of romance and the etiquette of courtship, your brain is still running a checklist it hasn't updated in 200,000 years. It's asking, will this person protect my future children? Will they stay? Will they wander? Do they look healthy enough to bear offspring that will survive the winter? You don't hear the questions consciously, but your body does. Your instincts, your reactions, your unexplained pulls towards certain people, all of them are echoes from a time when love wasn't a luxury. It was a survival strategy. The prehistoric mind had one job: ensure the continuation of the tribe. That meant passing on genes to the next generation, but not just any genes, the healthiest, most adaptable, most resilient genes. And to do that, early humans had to become experts in choosing partners, even if they didn't know they were doing it. The dance of attraction, the thrill of touch, the suspicion of betrayal, these weren't romantic complications. They were tools in a biological arms race for survival. Even today, your attraction is far from random. You might find yourself drawn to certain body shapes, vocal tones, facial features, but underneath those preferences is a complex calculation of fertility, strength, immunity, and behavioral reliability. In men, deeper voices often signal higher testosterone levels, a potential indicator of reproductive fitness. In women, subtle cues in movement, scent, and facial symmetry can unconsciously communicate health and hormonal balance. We don't always understand why someone feels magnetic. Our biology just taps us on the shoulder and says, choose them. And once chosen, another set of instincts kicks in. Because attraction was never enough, protection was everything. For early humans, raising a child was a dangerous, resource-heavy endeavor. One parent could rarely do it alone. That's where attachment came in, not just as affection, but as a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. The flush of oxytocin after intimacy, the pull to stay close, the surge of jealousy at perceived threats, these weren't signs of emotional instability. They were insurance policies. If your partner wandered, your offspring risked starvation, rejection, or vulnerability to predators. So your body learned to guard, to fear loss, to seek consistency, even if your rational mind said everything was fine. And yet, not everyone inherited the same blueprint. Just as some were drawn to long-term bonds, others carried the instinct to diversify, to spread their genes widely, to increase reproductive odds by seeking novelty. This didn't mean disloyalty in a moral sense. It meant genetic strategy. In unpredictable environments, having children with multiple partners could increase the odds that some would survive. Variety was a bet against extinction. That's why, even today, human mating behavior runs on a wide spectrum. Some feel deeply fulfilled in monogamy, others feel stifled. Some bond easily, others avoid attachment. None of it is purely psychological, it's biological variance. Your particular configuration, how you love, how you bond, how you react to jealousy, is likely a blend of evolutionary survival strategies, fine-tuned by the needs of your distant ancestors. Even the fear of infidelity, the gut-twisting anxiety that someone might choose another, is older than society itself. In males, it once signaled the risk of raising offspring that weren't genetically theirs. In females, it signaled the danger of losing support, resources, and protection. Both forms of jealousy served a purpose, keeping the pair together just long enough to ensure survival. Painful? Yes, but evolution never promised comfort, only continuation. And so, much of what we call modern relationships is actually ancient behavior in contemporary clothes. We swipe on screens, but we're searching for fertility cues. We schedule dates, but we're enacting rituals of courtship as old as firelight. We write poetry and plan proposals, but beneath the surface, the prehistoric brain is still calculating risk, reward, and the likelihood of commitment. Even breakups follow ancient patterns. The withdrawal, the obsessive thinking, the sudden shifts in energy, they mimic grief responses that once signaled social separation, exile, or loss of protection. The pain isn't just emotional, it's physical. Because to your nervous system, losing a bond still feels like a threat to survival. This isn't to say we are prisoners of biology. Far from it. What makes humans extraordinary is our ability to outgrow, rewire, and reimagine our instincts. But to understand them is to take the first step toward mastering them. You don't feel too much. You feel exactly what evolution needed you to. You don't want too much. You want what helped generations before you stay alive, even if their world looked nothing like yours. So the next time you feel a spark of jealousy, a craving for someone new, or a deep need to stay close, remember, it's not just about this moment. It's about the stories written in your blood, the long chain of choices made by people who had no words for love, but who felt it anyway. Their impulses are now yours. Their instincts still move you. And when you look at the person you love or long for, know this: what you feel isn't just desire, it's legacy. It's the echo of a million heartbeats that came before. There are those who are restless before the journey even begins, eyes scanning horizons, hearts pounding with the promise of roads not yet walked. And then there are those who feel at peace only when things are settled, rooted, familiar, when the ground underfoot belongs to them. One sees home in movement, the other in stillness. One dreams of distant coasts, the other of fences and gardens. And while the world calls this difference personality, your DNA might tell a deeper story, one written by the footsteps of your ancestors, across deserts, forests, plains, or riverbanks. Inside you is a compass you didn't install, a tug in one direction or the other, toward change or constancy, toward risk or routine. It's subtle but persistent, and it may have far less to do with your upbringing and far more to do with the migration paths taken by the people whose blood runs in your veins. Thousands of years ago, long before the first cities rose from the earth, humanity was divided not just by geography, but by rhythm. Some groups roamed, following game, weather, and opportunity. They traveled in small bands, adapting quickly, embracing the unknown, surviving through mobility. These were the nomads, the seekers, the movers. For them, motion was safety. Curiosity wasn't a luxury. It was how they found food, shelter, and life itself. Others stayed. They found fertile valleys, dependable water sources, stable climates, and they built. They cultivated the land, stored food, raised livestock. These were the settlers, the stayers, the builders. For them, permanence was power. Predictability meant survival. They measured seasons, studied soil, passed knowledge down through generations, each one growing deeper roots. Both paths had value. Both required intelligence, resilience, and adaptability, but they demanded different temperaments. And across millennia, those traits weren't just taught, they were inherited. In small, silent ways, the genes that favored exploration in one group were favored in another for stability. The chemistry of curiosity, the pull of novelty, the hunger for familiarity, all of it began to crystallize in the brain, shaping how individuals engaged with the world. Modern science has even begun to trace some of this. Variants of the DRD4 gene, often nicknamed the wanderlust gene, have been associated with novelty seeking, risk taking, and a greater tendency toward movement and change. Populations with a history of migration often show higher rates of these variants. It's as if the impulse to explore, to leave, to chase, to discover became part of the traveler's biology. Not just a choice, but an internal whisper, go. On the other hand, people with fewer of these variants may be more attuned to stability. They find comfort in repetition, strength in familiarity, and satisfaction in deepening roots rather than expanding horizons. They are the ones who build communities, who know their neighbors by name, who see value in tending to what already is, not just chasing what could be. Neither instinct is superior. They are two sides of the same evolutionary coin, one ensuring adaptation through expansion, the other through deep cultivation. And in the modern world, they still echo. Some people change jobs every few years, move cities for the thrill of starting over, feel stifled by routine. Others stay in one place, build long careers, protect their homes with fierce loyalty. These aren't just lifestyle choices, they're echoes of ancestral strategies, shaped by landscapes that rewarded movement in one group and settlement in another. Even your relationships might be influenced by this ancient compass. The person who always wants to try something new, who gets itchy when things feel too comfortable, might not be afraid of intimacy. They might simply carry the genes of those who survived by seeking out the next valley, the next herd, the next shelter. Meanwhile, the one who craves security, plans years ahead, and cherishes rituals may come from a lineage where staying in one place meant safety and survival. This compass doesn't just guide where you live or how often you travel, it shapes how you build your life. Do you crave adventure or legacy? Do you take comfort in new experiences or in traditions passed down like sacred stones? The answer isn't in your preferences alone, but in your past, in the movements of people who lived and died long before you were born, yet who still speak through your restlessness or your contentment. And perhaps that's why some people feel incomplete without motion, not because they're lost, but because they're following a path that began generations ago. And others feel a deep fulfillment in staying, not because they're afraid, but because they've already arrived where their ancestors were always trying to go. In a world that constantly asks you to define yourself, adventurer or homebody, spontaneous or stable, maybe the truth is less binary. Maybe you're not just choosing a lifestyle. Maybe you're listening to a rhythm that was carved into you before language, before maps, before names. A rhythm that helped your ancestors survive by running or by rooting. And once you recognize it, the conflict softens. You don't have to explain why you can't stay still or why you can't bear to leave. The answer isn't a flaw, it's a memory, a direction, a compass still spinning. You may not think twice about how you handle heat or cold. Maybe you're the one who's always sweating when everyone else feels fine, or the one layering up while others walk around in shorts. But these reactions aren't just quirks, they're coded messages from the places your ancestors called home, long before you ever stepped outside into summer sun or winter wind. Your body had already made decisions about how to survive in those elements. Decisions shaped by climate, scarcity, and centuries of natural selection. Your skin, your sweat, your shivers, all of it is history in motion. Temperature, more than almost any other environmental factor, has sculpted the human body. Because no matter where early humans went, across deserts, tundras, mountains, and islands, they had to solve the same problem in different ways. How to keep the internal fire burning just right. Too hot, and the body shuts down. Too cold, and life slips away. Survival depended on maintaining a narrow thermal window, and the body adjusted accordingly. In hot, sun-scorched regions near the equator, evolution favored people who could stay cool under pressure. Quite literally. These were the lands of relentless heat and intense solar radiation. The skin darkened, not just for appearance, but as a built-in shield. Melanin became the body's natural sunblock, protecting against ultraviolet rays that could damage DNA and deplete vital nutrients like folate. At the same time, sweat glands multiplied and became more efficient. Evaporative cooling, sweating and allowing it to dry, became the dominant defense against overheating. People adapted to release heat fast, to survive days where shade was scarce and water even scarcer. Meanwhile, further north, in colder, harsher climates, the story changed. The sun was weaker and UV exposure was limited. Lighter skin evolved, not as aesthetic, but as a necessity. The body needed more vitamin D, which comes from sunlight. With less melanin, the skin could absorb more of the limited UV rays and produce enough of this critical nutrient to maintain bones, immune function, and reproductive health. At the same time, the body adapted to retain heat, not lose it. Limbs grew shorter, noses narrowed, fat storage increased. Everything shifted toward conserving warmth. Even the blood vessels, which learned to constrict more easily to protect the core when the cold hit hard. These changes didn't happen over decades. They took thousands of years, sculpted generation by generation. And even now, they remain in our biology. If you've ever noticed some people handle heat waves with ease, while others wilt, or some seem unfazed by cold, while others are miserable in a breeze, you're seeing climate legacy in action. Evolution didn't stop with skin tone. It altered the very way our bodies manage heat, how much we sweat, how fast we circulate blood, how efficiently we generate or release warmth. Even something as subtle as body shape carries ancestral wisdom. In warmer climates, taller and leaner bodies allowed heat to dissipate more easily, more surface area, less insulation. In colder regions, stockier builds helped conserve heat, compact forms, better retention. It's called Bergmann's rule in biology, but in reality, it's just ancient adaptation turned into body type. And your sweat? It's not just a nuisance, it's a survival strategy. Some people sweat more, some less, but those differences often align with ancestral climate. High sweat output is extremely effective in dry heat, where evaporation works quickly. But in humid environments, where sweat can't evaporate as fast, the body faces a different challenge. And those from such regions often developed other coping strategies: slower movement, different clothing, even cultural adaptations around rest and hydration. Thermal tolerance also lives in your nervous system. Your brain's hypothalamus, the part that regulates temperature, responds to signals based on both immediate conditions and inherited tendencies. Some people naturally trigger cooling or heating responses more quickly. They shiver sooner, they flush faster, they adapt or struggle, depending not just on where they are, but where their lineage was. But climate didn't just shape physiology, it shaped cultures. In cold climates, societies developed architecture and clothing to trap heat. In hot regions where structures were open, loose-fitting garments dominated, and midday work slowed. Over time, these environmental adjustments became woven into daily life and into the epigenetic factors that can switch certain genes on or off across generations. This means you're not only carrying the blueprint of ancient adaptation, but potentially the active instructions for how to handle the environment based on the experiences of your more recent ancestors. If your grandparents lived in a cold climate, their bodies may have passed along not just genes, but gene expressions, biochemical nudges that say, prepare for frost. In today's world, We've built systems to control our environments: air conditioning, heating, insulation, climate controlled vehicles. But your body still remembers, it still reacts. It still expects the wind, the sun, the snow, the fire. And in that way, every moment of discomfort, every sudden chill or unexpected sweat is a reminder that you are not simply existing in the present. You are shaped by climates long gone. So whether you thrive in the summer or come alive in the winter, whether your skin tans easily or burns within minutes, whether you love the sauna or dread the cold, none of it is random. It's ancestral memory, survival knowledge, a kind of biological poetry, written in temperature, rewritten in time. And though you may live in a climate-controlled apartment, your body still thinks in terms of weather, still scans for heat and cold, still carries the armor and vulnerabilities of those who endured the elements before you. You are not just built for comfort, you are built from challenge, from adaptation, from wind and fire, from frost and sun, from survival. You walk into a crowded room. Some part of you lights up at the hum of conversation, the movement, the opportunity to connect, to lead, to shine. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe your pulse quickens, not from excitement, but from tension. You scan for a quiet corner, a place to observe, to breathe, to not be seen. In today's world, this is framed as personality, introvert or extrovert. But what if this isn't just who you are, but who your ancestors needed you to be? Long before cities and social networks, early humans lived in tightly knit groups, tribes, clans, bands of no more than a few dozen people. And within those circles, survival depended on more than physical strength. It required a balance of social roles. There were the leaders and the followers, the speakers and the watchers, the strategists and the scouts. There was no luxury for redundancy. Everyone had to bring something unique to the fire. Extroversion in that world was more than charisma. It was a tool. Those who could quickly build rapport, manage conflicts, inspire action, or mediate disputes were vital. They rallied hunters, soothed tension, negotiated with neighboring groups. Their boldness wasn't just charm, it was strategy. Their reward wasn't just attention, it was influence, status, access to mates and resources. Natural selection favored social initiative because it helped secure safety through cohesion. But equally essential were the quiet ones, the observers, the cautious, the individuals who didn't rush in but watched, who noticed shifts in behavior, in wind, in silence. They were attuned to subtlety. They spotted danger before others did. A strange footprint, an unusual cough, a flicker of aggression in someone's eyes. These were the ones who felt more comfortable on the edge of the circle, but who often saw the clearest. They remembered details. They asked fewer questions, but heard more answers. Their contributions weren't loud, but they were life-saving. This is the ancestral blueprint of what we now call introversion and extroversion. It's not a flaw or a binary. It's a functional diversity written into the social genome of our species. The need for both the loud and the quiet, the front line and the backstage, the connector and the contemplator. You didn't evolve to be like everyone else. You evolved to fill a gap. Modern genetics even supports this. Certain dopamine-related genes influence how responsive people are to external stimulation. Those with more sensitive systems get overstimulated quickly. Large crowds, noise, constant input can overwhelm them. They're often drawn to solitary activities, deep thinking, careful planning. Others, with less sensitive systems, seek stimulation to feel alive. They crave novelty, social interaction, risk. Neither is better. Both serve a purpose. In a prehistoric setting, imagine a tense moment around a campfire, a conflict brewing. The extrovert might step in, speak loudly, diffuse the tension, or redirect attention. The introvert watches, calculating the deeper undercurrents, noticing who's clutching a stone a little too tightly. Together, they provide a fuller picture, the action and the insight. One protects the group from internal breakdown, the other from external threat. Even today, these traits ripple through your everyday life. Extroverts might excel in fast-paced environments, sales floors, classrooms, stages. They draw energy from people, thrive under attention, move fast. Introverts may flourish in spaces where focus, patience, and quiet analysis matter. Research labs, studios, remote offices. They recharge in solitude, speak with precision, and often think before they act. These aren't just preferences. They're reflections of the ancient roles your DNA once prepared you for. And yet, we often label one as stronger, more successful, more admirable. But consider this. Many of history's revolutions were whispered before they were shouted. Many of the most influential decisions were made not in the heat of the crowd, but in the silence of thought. Just as many fires were lit by the ones who dared to speak, others were kept alive by those who watched them closely. Our problem isn't difference. It's forgetting that difference is necessary. Social comfort isn't random either. Some people are hardwired to feel safe in groups. Their ancestors relied on strong alliances, tight-knit communities. Others carry emotional circuitry that prizes caution, independence, or selectivity, perhaps shaped by ancestors who experienced betrayal, exile, or the pressure to survive alone. Your ease or discomfort in social situations may have less to do with trauma or conditioning and more to do with inherited expectations of what safety feels like. Even in love, in parenting, in friendship, we bring these ancestral roles forward. Some of us listen before we speak. Others fill silence with stories. Some lead with empathy, others with energy. When it works, it's balance. When it fails, it's often because we forget that our emotional language was never meant to be identical. We were always supposed to be different. So if you find yourself shrinking from the crowd or craving the spotlight, pause before you judge it. That instinct might be older than you can imagine. Maybe your quiet is not shyness, but alertness. Maybe your energy is not noise, but protection. Maybe who you are is who your ancestors needed most at the moment the fire almost went out. You are not broken for needing space. You are not excessive for needing people. You are exactly what you were meant to be, a living echo of roles once critical to survival, a quiet scout or a bold voice. And somewhere in that lineage, someone survived because you were wired this way. You close your eyes at night, and the modern world begins to blur. Streetlights fade, the noise of the day dissolves, and suddenly you're running through a forest, chased by something unseen, or falling endlessly with no ground in sight, or standing in a room where everyone is watching and you can't speak. These dreams feel bizarre, disconnected from your daily life. But what if they aren't meaningless? What if your subconscious is not confused, but rehearsing? What if instead of fantasy, your dreams are ancient code, survival algorithms passed down from a time when every night held danger and only the alert made it to morning? Long before alarm clocks and bed frames, humans slept in the open, vulnerable to predators, weather, rival clans. Night was not a time of peace, it was a time of risk. And so the brain evolved a system to keep the body still, but the mind awake. Not in the conscious sense, but in a hyper-real simulation, a testing ground for fear, danger, memory, and instinct, a way to practice without dying. You dream of being chased because your ancestors were. That pounding heart, that feeling of dread, it's not random. It's your brain rehearsing escape, fine-tuning the fear response, strengthening your reflexes without real risk. You fall in dreams because falling was a primal threat, from cliffs, trees, ledges, even while climbing. Your dream doesn't punish you with panic. It sharpens you with it. And that moment when you wake up sweating, unsure if it was real, that's not failure. That's success. Your brain ran the drill. You survived, even if only in simulation. Some researchers call this the threat rehearsal theory of dreaming. It suggests that dreams serve as a nightly theater where worst-case scenarios play out so that we're better prepared when the real danger comes. And even though most of us will never be chased by a predator or fall from a cliff, the machinery hasn't changed. The prehistoric brain doesn't know you're safe in bed. It only knows the script it's been rehearsing for thousands of years. Even dreams that seem abstract, losing teeth, being late, standing naked in public, may trace their roots to ancient fears. The fear of vulnerability, the fear of exile, the fear of not being prepared when it matters most. These weren't just emotional anxieties, they were threats to survival. To be left out, to be exposed, to be unready, these things could once cost you your life. And so your dreaming mind, trying to help you, runs the scene again and again, hoping next time you'll move faster, speak louder, escape sooner. But dreams aren't the only whispers from the past. There's also intuition, the sudden knowing without logic. You walk into a room and feel something's wrong. You hesitate before shaking someone's hand. You feel a pull to turn left instead of right. These aren't supernatural powers. They're the product of ancient pattern recognition, your subconscious picking up microsignals, too subtle for your rational mind, and delivering them to you as a gut feeling. Your ancestors didn't have time for long deliberation. A rustle in the grass couldn't be studied. It had to be interpreted instantly. Was it wind, a friend, or a threat? Those who hesitated were often the ones who didn't return. But those who felt first, who acted on instinct, survived. And they passed down the wiring that made that possible. Today, you might call it overthinking, anxiety, a weird vibe. But often, it's your mind recognizing patterns it has seen before, not in your lifetime, but in the accumulated experience of thousands. Your body isn't lying to you, it's remembering, even when you've forgotten what it's remembering. And when that intuition proves right, when you avoid something dangerous without knowing why, it's not coincidence, it's calibration. A prehistoric nervous system working perfectly, even if the world around it has changed beyond recognition. Of course, the signals aren't always accurate. Just as dreams can spiral into nonsense, intuition can misfire. The system evolved to keep you alive, not to keep you comfortable. It was built to detect lions, not traffic patterns. Social rejection, failure, and embarrassment. Your brain treats them with the same urgency as physical threat because it still believes community is survival and exclusion is fatal. In the ancestral world, being cast out meant death. So when you feel nervous before a presentation or panicked before a date, the intensity isn't irrational, it's ancient. Even night terrors in children may be relics of this prehistoric urgency, their young minds learning the contours of fear, rehearsing for dangers they'll likely never face, but that evolution still wants them to be ready for. And sleepwalking? It may be a glitch in the system, a protective mechanism that once allowed rapid awakening and movement when danger was near, misfiring in the safety of modern bedrooms. These aren't flaws, they're fossils. So the next time your dream shakes you or your intuition jolts you without explanation, remember, you are a descendant of those who feared first, moved quickly, and listened to what couldn't be seen. Your nightmares aren't failures of peace, they're blueprints of resilience. Your hunches aren't guesses, they're messages from minds older than memory. You dream because your ancestors needed to. You feel because they did. You survive, not just in the daylight, but in the darkness too. You are the sum of misfires, a mosaic built not from perfection, but from error, chaos, and adaptation. Every cell in your body carries the story of survival through 1,000 near misses, genes that duplicated by accident, mutations that once seemed meaningless, even harmful, until they proved to be the key to surviving what came next. You are not nature's masterpiece. You are its prototype, tested, revised, broken, and rebuilt across time. The human genome, your genome, is not a flawless script. It is a patchwork of edits written in blood, hunger, heat, and chance. Some of your traits exist because of viruses that invaded your ancestors' DNA and never left. Some exist because of ancient environmental catastrophes, droughts, volcanic winters, mass migrations. You didn't evolve smoothly. You lurched forward in fits and starts, through bottlenecks and disasters, through desperate decisions and miraculous recoveries. And every part of you reflects that. Even what you consider your flaws might have once been strengths. The gene that makes you more prone to inflammation, it may have helped your ancestors survive sepsis from infected wounds. Your tendency toward anxiety, it may have kept 100 of your predecessors alive by making them cautious in dangerous places. Your sensitivity, your vigilance, your need to analyze everything before acting, none of it is weakness. It's strategy. Old strategy, dusty but not obsolete. What we often call evolution's mistakes, like color blindness, lactose intolerance, even vulnerability to certain mental states, are usually remnants of a time when these traits were neutral or even useful in specific environments. Evolution doesn't aim for perfection. It selects what works, and what works depends entirely on where, when, and how one survives. You're not the product of what's ideal. You're the result of what didn't die. Even beauty, your face, your shape, the sound of your voice, is filtered through the brutal logic of ancient choices. Traits that triggered desire, that signaled fertility, youth, health, or strength. These were favored not for aesthetics, but for their link to the continuation of the tribe. And in every strand of your DNA, there are remnants of that long, ruthless game. Genes that succeeded not because they were right, but because they were good enough to go on. And you went on. You, the result of a billion imperfect choices. You are not the best version. You're the version that made it. But now, in a world of artificial lights and endless information, of digital lives and climate control, you carry a body and mind that was not made for this place. It was made for struggle, for dirt, for wind, for constant negotiation with the unknown. That's why you sometimes feel lost, restless, too much, not enough, because you were built for a world that no longer exists, but you're still here, adapting, again, and that brings us to now. You've traced this lineage through hunger and heat, through fear and dreaming, through instinct and desire. You've seen how prehistoric survival shaped your immune system, your social patterns, your nervous tics. And now you ask, what do I do with all this? You live with it. You live with it differently. You stop blaming yourself for every impulse, every feeling, every hardwired reaction you can't explain. You stop carrying shame for your body, your mind, your fear of the unknown. You understand that much of your suffering isn't your fault. It's your inheritance. But that inheritance, once seen clearly, is no longer a burden. It's a compass, a map of what you were built for, a reminder that your fragility is actually finely tuned survival. You begin to meet your instincts with curiosity, not contempt. You notice that your fear is a tool, that your anger is often protection, that your exhaustion isn't laziness, but the body trying to manage 1,000 invisible calculations. You start asking, what is this ancient part of me trying to do right now? What was it trying to save? And when you do that, when you speak to yourself in the language of biology, not judgment, something remarkable happens. Compassion replaces control. You realize your worth isn't earned, it was inherited. Simply by being here, you are the continuation of a story so improbable it defies mathematics. You were not chosen for greatness. You were chosen because enough people before you got through a day just long enough to pass on their code. They survived grief, famine, frost, fear, and failure, and still loved, still created, still hoped. And now it's your turn to live not in spite of your ancient wiring, but in alliance with it, to reframe your panic, your cravings, your strange midnight thoughts, not as flaws, but as fossils. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are human. In the end, the question isn't how do I erase my prehistoric self? It's how do I live alongside it? How do I honor the fire in my blood while walking streets it never imagined? You begin by understanding you are not a relic. You are a remix, a modern being with ancient rhythms, caught between two worlds, one of concrete, one of bone. And the more you listen to the part of you that remembers the forest, the fire, the storm, the more whole you become. You are not just the descendant of those who survived. You are living proof that they endured, and that, maybe, is enough.